and I have been working with the congregation. We started our 21st year with that church that we've been the same size as this one here. I've been able to retire twice, still get myself into more work that I want to. I have 4 part-time jobs, most of which are dealing with classrooms. I retired as a teacher twice, one as a professor with Freed Hardeman after establishing a Spanish major for the university and then going into the high school for 7 years teaching high school. And so I retired from the classroom. I still teach adjunct 2 classes for the UT system. I ended up getting more degrees than a man ought to have. But at any rate, I was able to get a master's in missions and biblical languages, a master's in Spanish, PhD in Mesoamerican cultures. I did all that back when we moved here in '94. But at any rate, one of the things that I've been able to do since I've retired is to travel more. I've always been a mission-minded because I've enjoyed going to other countries, working with other cultures, especially with other people. And this past summer, or past October, I was able to go to Tanzania. Of course, if those of you who remember Jim Massey, he did a lot of work in Nigeria in the early 50s, and a lot of his material is still there. And so I want to show you some things about Tanzania. I do a lot of preacher training. I'm involved with the Bear Valley Institute, Bible Institute out of Denver, Colorado, which is a very, what I call biblical school. You even have to sign a doctrinal statement before they will allow you to teach for them. But at any rate, I'm involved with them. I do a lot of Spanish work. Go into Mexico, Guatemala. I'll be going to Honduras in July and teaching seminars and preachers. But one of the things I want to show you is that we did have our children. This is a picture of that is 2 years old. Now, my oldest grandson is not there. Michael will turn 21 in October, but he is 6'5" and weighs about 375. And he comes up and gives you a hug. I mean, they have to give their pa and ma a hug. And he comes up, it's like having a bear grab a hold of you. You know, and I'll have to tell him, man, get off of me. You know, but he's not in the picture. But you can see the twins, Kevin and Yvette, are there. And all of their children. Our daughter-in-law is not there. She was sick that day. She suffers from Crohn's and migraine headaches really bad. But at any rate, they're all faithful. All of our children are faithful. All of their spouses are faithful, and they're all involved in the church in one way or another, teaching, leading, singing, whatever. And 4 of our grandchildren are members of the church. So, you know, I consider the fact that we've been blessed in a lot of ways, but for a preacher to be able to remain, or a missionary to have all of his children and their spouses and grandchildren be faithful is indeed a blessing. And, you know, I'm thankful for what Glendale has done for us. But I want you to look at some things that I did, like I said, in October with Tanzania. Now, I don't know if you know where Tanzania is, but it's a long way from here. I can tell you that. And Tanzania is in Africa. And I traveled. It took me 2 days to get there. This gives you an idea of where I flew. I flew from Nashville to Toronto, from Toronto to Addis Ababa, and stayed there overnight. And then I traveled into Tanzania, which you'd fly into Dar es Salaam. Now, let me tell you, one of the strangest things about being in that part of the country, it's awfully strange to be awakened by a Muslim call to prayer at 4 in the morning. I mean, it's not like being here in Florence, I can tell you that. But at any rate, I flew from there and went into Tanzania to go to what was called the Chamala Missions. And this is a hotel that I stayed in while I was there, getting ready to go to them. Now, this is just a picture. I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. But at any rate, the Chamala Mission, you fly from Dar es Salaam to Mbeya. From Mbeya, you take a 2-hour trip into the wilderness to the Chamala Mission. And, you know, this picture of this airport kind of reminded me when we went to the Muscle Shoals Airport several years ago. Now, the Chamala Mission, as you can see here on the slide, is in the wilderness. But it was started, those of us who remember the Conley-Hicks debate on divorce and remarriage. Andrew Conley was the one that started the mission in 1952 there at Chamala. And as the government was going from colonialism in 1950s over to independence, the churches, if they wanted to be recognized by the government, they had to establish a hospital. And so Andrew Conley was the member, the preacher who had established that missions. And as you can see, it is a 450, at least on the main campus, is a 450-acre site. And him and his wife stayed there for several years as they worked with that and did a lot of work in establishing it. We'll see how they have all these things, but this is a picture of the hospital. And the hospital is a very modern hospital, because in that hospital you have approximately, or they do have 128 rooms. And there is nothing that you can have done here that you can't have there. They're overseen by one of the main hospitals in Maryland, and it is amazing. I mean, I've thought, what happens if you have to have heart bypass? You go to that hospital, they can do heart. There's anything you have done here, they can do here, do in Chamala. But they have not only the hospital, they have a nursery school, they have a full K through 12 school that is there, of boarding school children. This is a picture of the food line that is being handed out. You know, we got used to eating beans and rice when we were in school here at Heritage back years ago. And so all they eat, beans and rice, is their main meal. And I mean, it's just amazing how well and what they do there. But a lot of those children, after they are graduated from there, end up going to the Bible school that we'll look at here in just a minute. But on that 450-acre site, there are a lot of guest homes. Many of the people that work with the hospital or work with the school, those who come in like me, who spend a week or 2, 3, 4, whatever the case may be, to teach in the preacher's school, they stay in these guest homes. This home that you're looking at here was built back in 1968, and it has 12 bedrooms. I mean, it is huge. I mean, I got lost trying to go to the restroom. It was so large. But at any rate, about 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd walk out the back door, which you can see here, and I would see the antelope running across the mountain that was about 1,000 yards away from the house. And we'll see in just a minute some things. This is the bedroom, you know, so they're nice bedrooms. But one of the things you have to do, it's Africa, it's in the tropics, and you've got to sleep with a net, a mosquito net, and there is no air conditioning. You know, you have 95-degree weather. It's hot, all I can tell you. And I wasn't there during the hottest time of the year. This is a picture of the lady. Mama Betty is her name. She was converted by one of the missionaries that was there several years ago, and she is the one of the cooks that are there in the house. But here's an idea, or here's a photo of the back part of the house. You may not be able to see very well in the photo, but way in the background you see this mountain, and this is where you see a lot of the antelope and even the lions. You'll see the antelope running, and then you'll see a lion chasing after them early in the morning. But this is a mango tree. If you've ever been to the tropics, you know what a mango is, or mango tree. I have never seen a mango tree this large. I think probably the trunk would take about 8 men or 8 people hand in hand to go completely around it. It was huge. But this is a field in which it's in, that they plant corn and rice at times. I would walk from the residence. It was about 400 yards to go to the school where I was teaching my classes. And I had to be careful in the afternoon when I would come home, because the monkeys would throw mangoes at me. I mean, you know, Jimbo in Texas, we don't have monkeys, except for I guess some of the people you could call monkeys. But I mean, to have mangoes thrown at you, so it was a different experience. Our son is an electrical engineer for National Electric, and he's one of the VPs there. But I had taken this picture of a transformer. This is out in that field There's nothing around it. I mean, you can walk up there and touch it, and you can have some fried bacon. I mean, it's right there, a high voltage transformer. So things are not the same there as they are here. But this is a picture of the school. Now, if you look on the left, you'll see the classrooms, and there are several more classrooms, a little bit more. And then on the right, there's their administration and a library that was impressive. It was impressive as how large it was. But here is the man that got me interested. About a year and a half ago, Chad Wagner had him and his family decide they wanted to worship with us. They were missionaries in Tanzania for 5 years. He has 4 girls and 1 boy. One of the girls is married, lives up in the Upper Peninsula. Her husband is a preacher up there. But at any rate, Chad asked me, he said, I'd like for you to get involved with Bear Valley Institute. You have advanced degrees, and I'd like for you to start teaching some classes to the preachers in Tanzania and maybe even in Nigeria. I said, I don't know, Chad. Well, anyway, he prevailed on me, and I was able to go. But anyway, Chad came down the last weekend that I was there because there was a graduation that was taking place. But Chad, he's standing here with the translator that we had, one of the elders of the church that was there, and he is my translator. He is a 3-time combat war veteran. He fought in the Zambian War, fought in the Congolese War, etc. But he and I just had more fun together as companions. At 7:30 every morning, we had a chapel in which all of the students got together, and it was really an uplifting thing. They had 3 women who were a part of the school there, one was married to one of the students, and she was teaching or learning to be a teacher in the school system there on the Chamala Mission, and the other 2 were learning to be Bible teachers for local congregations. But during that time, we would get together and we would have a Devo in which we had some time together studying the Bible and then the singing. I have some audio of it, and to be able to hear the singing that they took part in was just amazing at the things that they would say. But at any rate, here is Richard Cave, or not Richard Cave, Richard Cave, who is one of the missionaries there, 69 years old. He and his wife, Carol, went down there for a year. They're overseen, or the work is now overseen by one of the congregations close to Montgomery, and he was speaking in this slide. And here is myself, and the name just slipped me. I just lost his name. But anyway, he and I are teaching together. I taught just about every morning during the chapel time as well in class. Now here's the classroom. I had 10 students while I was there. In the 2 weeks that I taught 1st and 2nd Samuel the first week that I was there, and then I taught Christian ethics for preachers the second week. And one of the things that was amazing to them is that I told them, okay, this is a college level course, and you're going to have a final at the end of each class. They thought I was going to kill them. I pulled a Jim Massey exam on them, Jimbo and Ben. I mean, they took the whole class time to try and get that out. And I said, this is the most brutal exam we ever had. I said, this isn't brutal. You ought to have Brother Massey. But at any rate, while I was there, I went around doing some preaching on Sunday and Wednesdays, both Sunday morning, Sunday evening. This is the first congregation that I went to that was called Chosi A. Now you see at the bottom of that banner there, Kanisa la Cristo is the Swahili word for Church of Christ. Kanisa is the word for church. I deal with 8 languages, okay, and including Greek and Hebrew, but I pick up languages rather rapidly because I know how to teach them. I know how to learn them. But one of the things that was amazing to them, the 3rd day I was there, I began reading in Swahili. By the time 2 weeks was there, we'll see in just a minute, I was able to get up during the graduation. There were 6 of us there, and they wanted all six of us to speak at least 15 minutes. I don't know about y'all, but listening to 6 preachers for 15 minutes is a wow. Okay. But I got up there for about 3 minutes, but I spoke in nothing but Swahili. And of course, it just amazed the people, especially the students that were graduating, because of what I was able to say. And it was kind of funny. But at any rate, this is one of the congregations. These are two of the students. Both of these are Congolese. They came over to Tanzania as children during the Congolese War. But the one who is reading up at the pulpit is Samuel, and then the other one is Tomoye. Now, both of these guys are French speaking, and it's been a while since I spoke French, but was able to speak to them some in French as we went through. This is another congregation that I spoke to. The Chosi had about 20 people. It was a small church way out in the bush, good ways, and people have to walk there to get there, or either they ride what they call a piki, which is a little Honda 250 motorcycle. And it's amazing because they can take that motorcycle. These women will be driving those motorcycles, and they have all their wares up on top of their head, and they don't drop anything. I don't know how they do it. But can you imagine having 4 lengths of 21-foot, 2-inch pipe on that thing driving down the road? I don't know how they do it. I mean, they just don't do things like we do here, folks. I can tell you that. But this is a sweet congregation that I spoke at. But during that time, went to see the school, went to the main church, which is called the Missions Church. This is the congregation of the church building as you see here. And the school children that they have, the boarding school children that go, that are at the school, they go on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and then they have the main service at 6:30 for the rest of the congregation. And to hear these children sing is amazing. Children have the propensity to sing at a very loud voice, and to hear them sing, I mean, it's just, it touches your heart. And many of these children, once they graduate, end up going to some of these outpost churches and begin teaching and begin works and help with their parents. Here's another picture. This is where I am speaking on Wednesday night. This might be the one that may have the music or the singing, but we won't hear it. But at any rate, at this missions church, there's about 300 people that attend there, that was established there. But this is the decoration for Sunday service. The women go all out. They establish, they put up a lot of curtains like they do here in the front. But the man that is standing at the pulpit is one of the elders. At this congregation, they have 3 elders that attend there. And oddly enough, they have this strange belief that if they're an elder, that all of their children ought to be faithful. I don't know where they picked that up, but all their children are faithful. And so they were getting up, and the elders get up, and the deacons, as they wait on the table on Sunday morning service. This is the last congregation that I spoke at just before I came home, the Manolo congregation. And every African church does something that is unique to that area. I spoke to them, obviously, and had a translator that was there. And Maynard is the guy that does the administrative work for the Chamala missions as he was translating. But I want you to see part of that work, or part of the custom of the churches, is after the services are over, they begin singing a song, and everybody goes out from the back pew, and they go back until everybody is outside in a circle. And as you go around that circle, you're singing and you're greeting everyone that is in that circle. And I thought, it was really a loving custom, really. But one of the things that was amazing to me, I mean, if you have a problem with a brother, you get into that situation, how are you going to greet that person? I mean, if you didn't greet somebody as you're going out, I mean, it was frowned on. They want to know why is there something wrong that you have against that brother? So this is one of the things that they did all the time as we close the service. Now, I jumped too fast here. All right. This is a picture as we had the graduation on Saturday before I returned home. They had 9 graduates that they completed a 2-year program of studying the Bible. Back years ago when we were at IBC, or like I said, now it's called Heritage Christian, We would go every semester, and every week we had to be involved in evangelism, knocking doors, or whatever the case may be as far as campaigns were concerned. And this is what they have to do as part of their program. They have to be involved in different aspects of evangelism and teaching within these local congregations, or else they will not get their degree. They will not be recognized as educated preachers. And so we had the graduation during that time. That last Saturday I was there, and the singing as you get these people together was just amazing. The singing was just, it was heart-wrenching. Here's a picture of me with some of the graduates and their families as we entered the service. Let's see, I can't see this well enough. This is Chad with the graduates as well. Now, after we got finished with the graduation, they feed everybody that is there. And this is the line, as you can see, that is forming. Now, there weren't chairs and tables. And if you've ever noticed, anybody that comes from Africa or even some of the Latin countries, they don't have knives, forks, and spoons. They say God gave you a knife, fork, and a spoon right there. And of course, you get just a little bitty old piece of chicken, a little old bitty piece of beef, if you're lucky, but most of it's beans and rice and a little watermelon, a quarter section of a watermelon. One of the things that I did is that I took, and the first thing I did was I ate that watermelon, but I took and bit off a little bit of that rind, made a little spoon, and started eating with that rind. And next thing I know, there's a bunch of people doing the same thing. But no tables and chairs. You can see here that the men are sitting in one area underneath the shade. The women and the kids are over in an area over here by themselves. And so they're very separate with what they do. We went out one day to the market. You know, we go to the store here in the United States, Walmart, Aldi's, whatever the case may be, Kroger's, and you have a tomato, you know, you got this, you got all these different things. All of these ladies that are sitting here on the ground, that's all tomatoes. I just couldn't understand, well, how in the world is there, you know, their tomatoes are tomatoes. But this is the way they do it. And you'll have lines of the same fruits and vegetables all the way down that market. Part of the market, of course, is having material that people buy. The ladies have these pieces of material that they don't make dresses out of. They just wrap them around their waist and they go on doing it that way. But I want to close this morning by saying this. This is a picture that was given to me by one of the administrators there in Tanzania at the Chimala Mission. And to be able to see a sunrise or a sunset out in the desert is amazing. Now, we don't know whether, you know, I'm not going to tell you whether this is a sunrise or a sunset. But the fact of the matter is, when you think about life, you know, we're always either in the ebb and flow of what's going on within our own lives. There's always a beginning and there's going to be an end. One of the things you probably noticed, I don't look like I did when I was here several years ago, 25 or 30 years ago. There's a little bit of a difference. I was telling somebody a little bit earlier, you know, the bad thing of it is when you get to this age, you think of food and you gain 20 pounds, you know, just from the thought. There's not as much up here as there was before. But the fact of the matter is that being a Christian is something that it doesn't matter whether we're at the end or at the beginning of our lives. It can always be a beginning because God gives us the ability to change every day, every minute of that day. I don't know about you, but I've looked, you know, I've been around here for 69 years. And the country that I live in today is not the same country that I grew up in. I mean, you don't have to have a PhD and be a rocket scientist to figure some of that stuff out. And to be honest with you, in my lifetime, the country has completely changed. I don't know if you've ever read the book of Jeremiah. I'm sure you have, but Jeremiah is one of those books you hate to study, hate to read because it's just so tragic at what takes place. And when you look at Jeremiah chapter 5, in fact, I want to read from two of those verses in Jeremiah chapter 5, because there are times that we go through in life that we really do not know what's going to happen, where we're going to be. People look at things, they do things today, they don't think about what is going to happen. But listen to what Jeremiah said in Jeremiah chapter 5, verses 30 and 31. Jeremiah said it this way: there is an appalling and horrible thing has happened in the land. The prophets prophesied falsely, and the priests ruled at their own discretion. My people love to have it so. You look around in congregations as we've traveled on several occasions doing some of our reporting, and I'm telling you, some of the brethren that we run across, and you look at some of the things that they do within their worship services and things of this nature, you think, what in the world has happened? What has happened to our brotherhood? What has happened to our country, to our city, to our county, to our state, to our country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? People do things today that they just don't really think about what's going on. It was the same thing in Jeremiah's day. Remember, Jeremiah is called what kind of prophet? He is the weeping prophet. And the book of Jeremiah and his writings of Lamentations, you just don't want to read them. But the fact is when in those Lamentations of Jeremiah, there is something that we can learn from. We see how Jeremiah looked at Jerusalem, the city that God had chosen for Abraham and for all his descendants. Keep in mind that God had them build that temple that was glorious. In fact, when you look at what is said in 1 Kings chapter 10, as Solomon builds that temple, as the queen of Sheba comes and listens to what Solomon has to say, look at his men servants, look at his palace, look at the city of Jerusalem. She says, the half has not been told of the glory that lies here in Jerusalem. It's kind of the same way with our country. But then all of a sudden what happens? Israel starts going down, 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 because they started chasing things that God didn't want them to chase. And as a result, you remember what happened to the temple? Who tore it down? Nebuchadnezzar tore it down. The very holy place that God had them build, Solomon to build to show his very presence in the midst of his people. But God, because of what they had done, and when you read 2 Chronicles chapter 36, it tells us that God had gotten to the point, because of what Israel did, that there was no remedy for getting them back. It's kind of like raising children. Sometimes you have a stubborn child like me, and I can remember my father telling me at times, he says, look, this is it. There's no turning back. You're going to get discipline. Well, he would call it a whooping, and I got him. But you could get to a point where God says, no more. He did that with Jerusalem, with the temple. You remember Jonah? You remember what happened to Jonah? God told him to go to Nineveh, to preach to Nineveh. What did Jonah do? He ran off the opposite direction. What happened to him? Did God raise that storm and that big fish because of the men that were on the ship? Because they were idolaters? No. It was because of Jonah that storm came about and threw him into that water and got him swallowed by that big fish. This country, our nation, I believe was founded because God wanted us to be rich to take that gospel outside this country, and people have changed. And so Jeremiah says, look, there's an appalling thing that has happened in this land. The religious leaders have changed everything. They started doing things at their own discretion, but look what it says in the last part of in verse 31 of chapter 5 of Jeremiah. He says, but what will they do when the end comes? I really believe that the only reason that God has made the country that we live in what it is, so that we as God's people can take the gospel to those people who need it. As long as we're living the way God wants us to live, God's going to bless us. I had a teacher one time that told me, he says, if it's going to be, it begins with me. You look at government, you look at the laws that we have established in our country, and they're important. Every law that we have is important. But the law that really, and the discipline that is really the most important, is that discipline that I instill within myself. then into my family, then into my community. But you see, when that self-discipline, that self-government breaks down, everything else is going to fall apart. We studied from the book of Romans chapter 6 today in our class. And Ben did a super job. But the fact is that when we continue in sin, have we considered what is going to be the ultimate end of the life that we have as a sinner? There are people today who just do things openly. I mean, people who take something that God has blessed us with. When we see a rainbow in the sky, it always helps me to remember Noah and the flood and the covenant that God made with Noah. But today, the colors of the rainbow are used to designate what? A sinful life that someone has accepted that is against God's desire, homosexuality. And the only answer that we have to lives like that is not in condemning or doing some things, letting our legislators free them and allow them to do it, but it's in standing firm on what the Bible says, because they need to consider what's going to happen. And unfortunately, there are times when God's people, because of their desire to not really cause a scene, will accept lifestyles such as that. I believe that it is time for we as the church to stand up and to proclaim God's message, because people do not understand what's going to happen if things continue the way they are. But the fact is, each individual in the Lord's church has to stand firm for what the Bible teaches. And we don't have that today. And so I want to close this morning. You know, I look at these things that places that I go and these people that I teach and people that touch my lives as I travel. And they often tell me, brother, when you go back to your country, I want you to do two things. Tell them thank you. Thank you for helping support you and us in the works that we do. And number two is to remain faithful so that we can continue to do our works. Imagine if we're not faithful. If we're not faithful to the Lord's cause, have we considered the life that we're living and what we're going to reap as a consequence? I believe that God calls all of us to repentance, to live the life that we need to live, and to continue doing what God wants to do according to the Scriptures. That's what Jeremiah tried to do to get these people back. You know, when you study the life of Daniel, you learn that Daniel went against what the government said. You remember that Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to eat certain things, and Daniel and his 4 friends said, no way, we're not going to do it. We're going to remain on the diet. Do you realize that 430 years that Israel was in Egypt, they never accepted the Egyptian ways? In Babylonia, those Jews were there for 70 years. And many of them maintained their Jewish traditions to do what God wanted them to do. We live in a world, we're living in Babylonia today, I think. But God expects us to be strong in what we need to do, and He calls us to be strong. You know, I believe that there's two people or two things that are standing at the door today of our country. Number one, it's somebody knocking at the door of destruction. You know, back when I was a teenager, there was a song called The Eve of Destruction. Of course, it was a political thing. Some of you remember that song. And perhaps that's what it is now. We might be standing at the very precipice of a destroyed country. But God says, all I need is one person, 5 people. You remember what God did with Abraham? Abraham, I'm going to destroy. I just went blank, folks. Man, what did He destroy? Sodom and Gomorrah. Man, I just went blank. Sodom and Gomorrah. But what did Abraham do? Why did Abraham continue to argue with God over that? Because you know what? Abraham had friends in that country, in those 4 cities. And so God says, okay, just 10. That's all. I won't destroy it for 10. Are there 10 righteous people here today? Or are there 50 some odd righteous people? That's what God calls us to. He's knocking at that door, as our song sings. He's standing at that door, looking to see if there are those righteous people. This morning, consider the end of the life that you're living and consider what God calls you to do. He's called us to be baptized to get rid of that sin. That's the only way. You can't be sprinkled. You can't just wish that you want to or accept Jesus as a personal Savior. He says you got to do something more than that. You got to get into that watery grave of baptism. We studied that from Romans 6 this morning, 1 through 4. Becomes that grave that gets us out. We rise to walk in a new life. But then we have to continue in that new life because that's what God requires us according to Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 14. And then be people who are zealous for good works, which Galatians tells us was prepared for us. Ephesians 2 that was prepared for us before the foundation of the world. If you're here this morning, if you're not a Christian, I want to encourage you to become one because he's at the door standing. If you're not faithful, think about becoming so while together we stand and sing.
Who at the door is standing, patiently